Elephant Man Podcast Network, grown man conversations dealing with elephants in the room. It's your man, Moray DB. Like, subscribe, share, hit the notification bell so you can know what new material is coming out, what's going on. Shalom, family. Shalom, shalom, shalom. Connect with us on IG, Elephant Man _podcast. Facebook is / Elephant Man Podcast, and on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe. Go ahead and subscribe. We're trying to blow the channel up and get the Bruise News out there. Also get those likes up so we can get those algorithms up as well. What's going on, man? Blessings to everybody, man. It's a lot, going on this week. And today I just want to talk about that selective empathy. And what is selective empathy? We're going to get into a little bit of that. I want to share a video first, and then we're going to get right into what selective empathy is.
Seen the situation in Ukraine, you've seen how the world is responding. Now let me show you how the world is covering this invasion. I'm talking about the media, especially Western channels. How are they covering Russia's invasion? With blatant racism. Let me say something at the outset. As journalists, we do not filter hardships and pain. We do not see caste, color, or gender. And we have stuck by this principle. When the Taliban stormed Kabul, we stood with Afghans. When Ethiopia attacked its own people, we questioned them. When unarmed black teenagers were gunned down in the US, we joined the outrage. Today, we are doing the same. We see the plight of the Ukrainian people, and we have reported on their hardships. But what about the Western media? They too are reporting on the crisis, on the war, on the refugees. But they do not see hardships. They only see race, the color of your skin, the color of your hair. Let me show you exhibit number 1. This exchange happened on the BBC, the so-called guardian of unbiased reportage. Listen to how their panel describes the refugees from Ukraine.
It's really emotional for me because I see European people with blue eyes and blonde hair being killed.
People with blue eyes and blonde hair. That is why the so-called expert on the BBC is emotional, not because the people are homeless, not because their country is being invaded, but because their hair is blonde. On social media, a lot of people are defending the BBC. They say it's a guest, not their anchor. Let me take you back to September last year. Another guest was speaking on the very same channel, South Asian expert Christine Fair. She called out Pakistan's links with the Taliban. Do you remember what the BBC presenter did? She shut her down. She said it was violating the channel's unbiased coverage. So exposing terror links is a violation. Blatant racism and white supremacy is fine. Gold standard indeed. Now for exhibit number 2, NBC News from the US. Listen to this.
These are not refugees from Syria. These are Christians, they're white, they're very similar.
Very similar to us. How so? Because the Syrian refugees are Muslims. Their skin is darker, their hair is not blonde. So Europe does not want them. And remember, this is not being said at some white supremacy cult. This is happening on live television. Exhibit number 3, CBS News, another American broadcaster. Their reporter is appalled by the war, not because there is death and destruction, but because it is happening in Europe.
Like Iraq or Afghanistan, this is a relatively civilized, relatively European city where you wouldn't expect that or hope that it's going to happen.
So Iraq and Afghanistan are uncivilized countries. Their people are uncultured. Their regimes are irresponsible. So they deserve war. They deserve hundreds of bombs and years of occupation. What about Ukraine? According to CBS, no. Ukraine does not deserve war or hardships because Ukraine is civilized. And now for the final exhibit. This one is not from the West. It is from Al Jazeera in Qatar. This anchor simply cannot comprehend the idea of European refugees.
What's compelling is just looking at them, the way they're dressed. These are prosperous, I'm loath to use the expression, these are prosperous middle-class people. These are not obviously refugees trying to get away from areas in the Middle East that are still in a big state of war. These are not people trying to get away from areas in North Africa. They look like any European family that you would live next door to.
That reporter is confused about the refugees. They look middle class, they look like Europeans. How is something so bad happening to them? Well, this is what systemic racism looks like. Do you remember the 2015 refugee crisis? Around 1.3 million people sought asylum in Europe. Most of them were from Syria, Afghanistan, and Nigeria. Do you remember how the West reacted? They shut their borders, they herded the refugees like cattle, and they branded them as terrorists. Back then, Western reportage was quite different. Let me show you what the BBC did. They prepared 7 charts depicting the refugee crisis. Let's focus on chart number 5. Which European countries are most affected? Now remember, this war was in West Asia. The bombs were dropping on West Asia, but this was the BBC's big concern. Which European countries are most affected? Now, just to be clear, we welcome what Europe is doing to host Ukrainian refugees. They deserve all the help. Our question is, why just Ukraine? Ukraine is not a member of the European Union. It is not part of NATO. So what explains this level of assistance? Racism. You see, Ukrainians are Europeans, hence they get the red carpet, but Africans and Asians get border crackdowns and refugee camps. Western media is part of the problem, I have to say. They reflect the public mentality, their sense of European supremacy. And the problem is, governments are not doing anything to help. In fact, they're adding fuel to this fire. Let me show you what Bulgaria's prime minister said about refugees. I'm quoting. These people are intelligent, they're educated people. This is not the refugee wave we have been used to. People we were not sure about their identity. People with unclear pasts who could have been even terrorists. That was a European head of state. He's openly calling West Asian refugees terrorists. If this does not expose Western hypocrisy, nothing does. They invaded Asian and African countries. They waged war. They committed war crimes. And when the people fled, they shut their borders. What does this tell you? That refugees were never the problem. That money or borders were not the issue. The issue was race. Think about it.
All right. Very, very interesting video. Not trying to stir the pot. It is what it is. You know, it's very funny. People always be like, well, don't talk about race or keep your eyes towards the great by and by heaven and different things like that. And, well, you know, we live in the fallen world. I've heard somebody say, you know, we live in the fallen world. Yeah, I know we live in the fallen world, right? The same person, he had daughters and he was like, oh, man, this really tripped out. They're about to have these bathrooms where whatever you identify as, they can go up in there, right? So watch, well, we know we live in the fallen world. No, you like, man, that's pretty rough. Media is very powerful. Media is very powerful. And if you don't go with the narrative of what's going on, they will look at it as if you go against the grain of what they consider the legit source, they will look at it as misinformation. And I'm telling you, they're going to take away a lot of channels. They're going to shut down a lot of different things, you know, because they want to be able to control the narrative. I'm going to show video number 2, and then we're going to get into what is selective empathy, not sympathy, selective empathy. All right. So let's check this out. Very, very interesting video check it out.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm Kira Phillips. So glad you're streaming with us today as thousands of people flee the violence in Ukraine. Worrying accounts now of racial discrimination are being reported throughout the evacuation efforts. The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees is now confirming to us that there are cases of discrimination in admitting refugees. One Congo native saying he was discriminated against while trying to board a train out of Ukraine. Take a listen.
They even told us, like, we are going to give you guns and you're going to fight for Ukraine. I said, hi, we're going to fight for Ukraine? We are not Ukrainian. We are black. So how can we fight? How can we fight for Ukraine? If we fight for Ukraine, we are going to die first because we are black. When they will see, oh, look at those black people. I think they are from, they are from NATO. So we have to kill them first. So how could they think that way? Come on, Ukraine.
Wow. Our ABC News' Marcus Moore with us now for more outside that train station in Poland. Marcus, I mean, here we are in the middle of a humanitarian crisis. People are still finding a way to dehumanize others, specifically others in need.
Kira, it is an ugly truth that is once again bubbling to the surface in the midst of a war, in the midst of a humanitarian crisis that is now unfolding here in Poland and Ukraine and in neighboring countries. And you heard from that gentleman there. He's 34 years old. He's lived in Ukraine for the past 9 years, originally from Congo, and he said he left the Republic of Congo for a better life, to escape the political situation, the strife there. And here he is once again now having to leave another country and is facing discrimination. Just a little bit more about what he said, Kira, that he and others endured as they tried to leave Ukraine. He is in Dnipro, or lived in Dnipro, which is just south of Kiev. And at one point on the train that he was trying to get on with so many other refugees, he said that the guards there said that only women and children would be allowed to board the trains that were headed west. And that then they saw that there were white men who were allowed to get on, but that the people of color were barred from getting onto that train. And it was a moment of disbelief for him, and certainly one of frustration. And he said that he would have gotten it on video, how the guards were aggressive, he said, towards the people of color, if he had had the time. But in the midst of the chaos, it was not his first thought to record what was happening. But certainly, as you know now, there have been a number of reports of discrimination that have unfolded in the midst of this mass exodus from Ukraine. And it's certainly very upsetting to him. But Kira, he said something very striking. For anyone who has been to that part of the world, and obviously the population is mostly white in Ukraine and in this part of the world. And he said that to be Black in Ukraine, that you expect to be treated a certain way. And so on a certain level, he wasn't surprised by what happened, but certainly he was saddened and frustrated today about what they all experienced.
You know what, if you don't mind, let's take a listen to another part of your exchange with him, Marcus, and talk a little bit more.
It was clear. It was clear because we are Black. That's why they were acting that way. Come on. We are Black people in a white country. We already know the way that we're gonna act with us. So for me, it's nothing.
Wow, that's amazing. It's nothing. You know, I wonder how many others are facing a similar situation, Marcus. I mean, could he give you any insight on that? Are you meeting others with a similar type of story?
Yeah, he said that if it was a person of color, man or woman, that there seemed to be a different experience for them, and that at one point, some of them were even pushed and shoved and beaten, is what he said. So, but in particular, he said that if you appeared to be from Africa, that you were subjected to clear discrimination, and even tonight, Kira. We have heard reports of incidents where people who appear to be from Africa have been harassed by members of right-wing organizations. Even tonight, and that there was an incident where the police had to show up to near one of the border crossings to allay the situation that was happening there. Don't have a lot of details on it, but we know that it's something that has occurred this evening, and it gives you some sense of the climate here and what these refugees who are already having to uproot their lives and go into an unknown future, some of them are being faced or met with just ugly discrimination as they try to find safety.
All right. So there you have it. Very, 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 very interesting. Very, very interesting. That's selective empathy. Selective empathy. Empathy for some, but not for others. We're gonna get into that again. This is not shocking, not breaking news. It is not to make you mad and get in your flesh, but it's a good food for thought. You know what I mean? And I'm gonna show a couple of pictures, very, very interesting. Look at all of these nations: London, Berlin, Rotterdam, Rome, Helsinki, and Brussels. They are shining blue and gold, blue and yellow on the buildings to be in consolidation with what's going on in Ukraine. And even in the United States, they go to in New York, and the political when he's at the State of the Union address, they just wear gold and blue, and they just start the war. We get it. We get it. We get it. Now, I'm not saying don't be empathetic. I'm not saying don't be sympathetic. I'm not saying any of that stuff. But it's got to be more to the situation. We know that it is more to the situation. All right. It's a whole lot more to the situation, right? And they are trying to. If you look at that area, it's old Khazaria. It's where the Ish people originally come from. The people that are in occupying Israel right now are not the people that's from the Bible. We get into that story later. They're from Khazaria in the 8th and 9th century. This is where old Khazaria is at. So King Bulan in the 8th and 9th century, he had a force, a Turkish Hun people from Russia. They really actually Russian, right? So they could have went and joined forces with and I'm gonna do a show on this, but I'm just touching it. They could have joined forces with the Byzantine Empire, with the Christian, or they could have joined with the Muslim, but they wanted to be neutral because they was friends with both the Christian and the Muslim. So they called for some rabbis or whatever, and they converted into Judaism. The Khazar people, the Ashkenaz, where you get the word Ashkenazi Jews. If you look up Genesis 10, it talks about it. We'll get more into it later because that's not what the show is about. So this area, and look where it is. It's the same exact area. It's a Khazar kingdom in the 10th century AD. And it's the same exact area as where the Ukraine is and the Russian conflict in Belarus right now. So, and Zelensky, he's a Ish as well. He's a Khazarian as well, right? So it's a battle. It's been going on for years, century that we don't talk about. And so they're trying to, in my opinion, they could be trying to, and I'm not making brother a Boy Scout like I said on my other show, but I just believe that they are trying to make the Russian leader look like the next Adolf. You know what I'm saying? If I can say it like that. And we got solidarity. We stand with him. He just so this, that, and other. Look at all of the stuff that he did. And look what he did to these people. Look what he did to these people. So terrible. And, and it is bad. I mean, I've seen, people crying and all that stuff. But then at the same time, in the crisis, everybody's trying to flee. Everybody's trying to leave the battle war zone. So how are you going to let some come on the train but not others, right? And say, no, you need to stay here and fight for this country. Like, I'm not even a citizen here. I'm trying to get back to my borders, right? And then even some of them, when they went to the Polish borders and stuff, it is like, no blacks, And so they kind of get the selective empathy. I'm going to show you this, and then I'm going to get into the definition. We already know about this. African immigrant students experience racism while fleeing the Ukraine war zone. Okay. Scores of African immigrants and students in Ukraine are being blocked from fleeing to safety as Russia attacks continue to devastate the country. Those trying to make the border crossing have been told the Independent. Black people living in the region says they have been left to languish with some taking it to Twitter in recent days to share accounts of abandonment. Speaking to an independent Osmerman, a father of 3, said he and his family members were weighed from the border on Saturday and told no blacks. Nope. Since then, I've been trying to get myself together to focus as normal, but it's been difficult, he said. All of my years as an activist, I have never seen anything like this. When I look into the eyes of those who are turning us away, I see bloodshot racism. They want to save themselves, and they are losing their humanity in the process. I cannot imagine a scenario where white Ukrainians will ever be denied asylum. So how how they treat us is unwarranted. It's baseless, and we are all escaping. So let's push a common thread. Ozerin, the Nigerian national who has lived in the Ukraine since 2009, said he was currently stranded at the train station in Kyiv, the capital city, along with thousands of others, unsure of their next move. So that's very, 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 very interesting. You know me, I always say that's very, very, very interesting, right? Yeah, man. And even if you think about how we're taught in school about Schindler's List and the Ish people and blah, blah, blah. Again, I'm not a denier of that. You know what I'm saying? I'm not a denier. I've seen the pictures. Terrible. Auschwitz, the whole thing. Terrible, right? I'm not a denier of that, right? That happened, but you can't pull out the world's smallest violin for one group of people while denying another group of people, And slavery was terrible for that was a Holocaust in itself. King Leopold killed some Bantu people in the Congo, and he was wanting to get the rubber trees in Congo. And those who did not harvest the rubber trees cut their hands off. Right, 10,000. You never hear about it, right? But once a year, we hear about what happened at Schindler's List and all of that stuff. And if you talk about it too much, you get treated like Whoopi. You get treated like Nick Cannon. You know what I mean? Got a strong legal force going on with that. You know what I mean? And so I'm not anti nobody. I'm just saying, it's wicked out here. You would think that it would be more empathy and compassion, because it's in a crisis. But it's like they go into survival of the fittest mode. It's me or you, and it's definitely. It's definitely going to be you. All right. So I'm gonna share this, and then I'm gonna be done. Let's see. I'm gonna share this. Selective empathy. Slides. See, can you see it? Selective empathy. What is it? Right. So let's get into that. What is selective empathy? First, let's talk about what is empathy. So empathy, what is it? It is the ability to understand another person's thoughts and feelings in a situation from their point of view rather than your own. It differs from sympathy, where one is moved by the thoughts and feelings of another but maintains an emotional distance. So sympathy is like, man, it sucks to be you. Sorry that happened to you, but there's no connection to it, okay? But empathy makes you connect with them, and what they're showing, they're not even showing even on the news. They're not showing the blatant racism that's going on. If they do, they might cover it a little bit. They're not really going on with it. 3 components of empathy: cognitive, emotional, and compassion. They said, oh, they didn't turn this into a class. Stick with me. We'll be done in 5 minutes. Cognitive, simply knowing how the other person feels and what they might be thinking. Sometimes called perspective taking. If you imagine yourself in your friend's shoes, okay? Something like that. Like, man, I can kind of feel with them, and I can put myself in their shoes, right? Emotional empathy. When you feel physically along with the other person as though their emotions were contagious. Like, man, they put up certain pictures. They pull on your heartstrings. They get on your emotions, right? To get you to act, right? You keep showing it. If you shining yellow and blue in solidarity with the Ukraine people, and I'm not saying you shouldn't. I'm just hear me out. You walking around, it's all around town, people walking around with these flags. You're going to get this compassion, emotional empathy for the people, right? And it's going to create a certain different kind of snapshot of the Russian leader. Compassionate. With this kind of empathy, we do not only understand a person's predicament and feel with them, but we are spontaneously moved to help if needed, right? Millions of dollars have been raised, right? I know that's not a no-fly zone, so of course a lot of people can't fly out of Ukraine like that. But hey, get the trains running. You know what I'm saying? And so it's kind of crazy. So it's like, man, if the bombs drop, it's gonna drop on the people who's not even from there, right? As you bring out the world's smallest violin, you know, that's not gonna work this time. We in the day and we in the age where it's like it's not gonna work that time. And then when you bring it up, it's like, well, man, you're so selfish. It's not about you. I remember even in school when they talking about 11/9. You know what I'm talking about, with the World Trade Centers. And I'm gonna say it like that: 11/9, 9/11. Yeah, kind of talking code. I'm just playing. But every year around that time, they pull on the heartstrings. They want you to be empathetic and sympathetic and this, that, and the other. And I remember in class, teacher crying and all of that. Then the other assistant teacher was like, man, you want us to pump the brakes and do all of this stuff for this, which 9/11 was terrible. A lot of people lost their lives. Again, we're not being uncompassionate. But it's like, well, man, you don't see the Garners, and I think at the time it was Mike Brown, or no, it was somebody that just happened with an incident with one of the brothers, and it was before George Floyd, but it was a couple of years ago. Man, we got stuff going on every day, and we're told just forget it, get over it, and turn the other cheek and keep looking to heaven. And then we have memorials, we have a never forget party like you have never seen before when it comes to this. And so I think that's real interesting, right? That they will say, never forget the song, but then telling others, I have to take all of that off so you can be able to read the slide. So very interesting. Again, just read this true in the fact. What is selective empathy? Let's get into selective empathy. Selective empathy is empathy restricted to particular groups, typically those you belong to or identify as similar to yourself. That's the reason why the reporters were saying words like, oh, they're Christian, they're white, they're similar. These are not like the other refugees. Well, what is a refugee? Somebody that's fled their country, right? So what does a refugee look like? You know what I mean? You have a narrative of what a refugee is. Oh, these are better, cleaner refugees. I don't know. They just a refugee. So a selective empathy is empathy restricted to particular groups, typically those who belong to or identify as similar to yourself. Refusing empathy to the others is century-old and rampant in every country. Those others are often ones who of the following, okay, like a Muslim people dismissed as terrorists. Wow. So and I think I had this conversation with my sons talking about terrorists and what is a terrorist? When you hear the word terrorist, when you type terrorist in Google, what comes up, right? You see Taliban, you see all these other things. But if somebody was to come, well, they don't really do that much no more, and burn a cross on your front lawn, that's domestic terrorism, right? Somebody threatening you, stopping you from voting if that's what you do. Block the polls in the ballot. That's terror. You're terrorizing. You're terrorizing me. But the narrative and the power of the media will make you think terrorists, okay, got to deal with somebody, got a bomb strapped to their back. And, that's terrorism, but not what these guys got going on. Some people are brave and other people are troublemakers, right? Selective empathy. Over the past 20 years, the kind of empathy practiced by many Americans has shifted from universal empathy, putting yourselves into the shoes of someone you know and might even dislike, to a more selective empathy that only works with people on your team. All right. So that's what's going on with that. You know, people is not being compassionate. And then they're running something else as far as like, you know what? It has been rough. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna make sure everybody taken care of. But when they do that, they're going for censorship. Where they be like, you know what? Your feelings hurt, her feelings hurt, they feelings hurt. So what we gonna do is just, you can't say nothing bad about nobody, or what they saying is bad, or you can't call nobody out. So they're gonna censorship it. They're gonna put censorship like that. So they finna do that reverse on there real quick. So that's very, very interesting, man. Let me know what you think. This is not divisive, a divisive show. But I'll be this grown man conversation dealing with Elvis in the room. Get those likes up so we can be higher in the algorithm, and subscribe if you haven't. Okay. So Elephant Man Podcast Network, thank you for all those who have prayed for us. In the recent we just lost my mother-in-law and stuff. So we thank you for the kind words and the prayers. For those who are praying for us, and we get strength from that. You know what I'm saying? And so we thank you, and we bless you, and we thank you. So let's close out in some prayer. Father, in the name of Yahushua HaMashiach, you said, if I be lifted up, I'll draw all men unto me. We lift you up, we worship you, we honor you, we adore you. Abba Yah, when enemy comes in like a flood, you raise the standard, Abba Yah. We thank you for giving us the pen of a ready writer, Abba Yah, and giving us words, what to say, what to do, how to maneuver, Abba Yah. We thank you for exposing the enemy. Thank you for exposing the intimidation and the manipulation, Abba Yah. We thank you for turning off the gaslighting and the witchcraft that goes on, Abba Yah. And we're going to worship you in the spirit and in truth, Abba Yah. And we thank you for all the many blessings you bestowed upon us. In Yahushua HaMashiach's name, amen. Elephant Man Podcast Network, grown man conversation dealing with Elvis in the room. We are out of here. Perfect. Perfect.